Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Please like, share, subscribe. Before we get started, this episode is on the enigmatic and extremely hostile and territorial and potentially xenophobic species simply known as the swarm, probably because due to their local dialect their actual name would be fundamentally unpronounceable to most other species. And this is the swarm, a Delta Quadrant technologically sophisticated race of humanoids encountered by the USS Voyager in the latter half of the 24th century. They did control an extremely large region of space. It's likely they possessed very advanced starships and technology equivalent to that of the Federation. They were one of the few races encountered by the Voyager crew to possess transporter technology. But much else of their capabilities is massively unknown. Although it is likely they had larger starships than the small fighters we saw, we never actually encountered them. But these were an industrialized society on a massive scale, able to produce tens of thousands of the swarm fighters capable of engulfing other starships. These vessels use interferometric pulses as a defense and offensive weapon. They would basically drag a ship out of warp, latch onto the hull, drain it of power, board the ship and kill the crew, and leave the vessel as a drifting carcass as a warning to anyone else that might try to violate the sovereignty of their space. The race would attempt to give a warning to those that were attempting to enter their space, but unfortunately either they were unaware or simply didn't care that other species were not capable of understanding their language, not at least without an attempt made to study it first, and as a result, races simply didn't get the warning. Interestingly, their choice of weapons were peculiar. They would fight close quarter fighting aboard starships, so they would actively choose to use bladed weapons and things like that, but the energy weapons they used actually were generally non-lethal, but were designed to cause an incredible amount of pain. In terms of physiology, they seem to be physically akin to a human in both build and size. There's no evidence that they were particularly any stronger than an average human. They had a somewhat reptilian appearance, but the exact basis of their biology is unknown. They simply couldn't vocalize the same way humans, so certainly internal differences also were prevalent, such as their cardiovascular system and likely their vocal cords, as they couldn't or wouldn't speak in our tongue. Other than that, again, we know very little about this species. As I said though, they did control a very vast region, so there are certain things we can surmise. One, they had very fast starships. You can't control a region of space that big without vessels probably at least capable of rivaling your average Federation starship. You're talking warp 9 and above, at least warp 8. The fact that they had transporters as well implies that they had other matter phasing technologies, or at least knowledge of them, so things like replicators were also potentially possible. This would solve certain needs their society would have for industrialization as well as food production, as well as basic maintenance and operation of their ships, and allow them to operate in deep space for a long period of time. It's likely they colonized and conquered a vast region of space. That size of an area of space in the Delta Quadrant is not likely to be unpopulated by other species, either more advanced or less advanced or just as advanced as the swarm themselves. These races would have been engulfed, either destroyed or conquered and enslaved in some way by the swarm, so we can assume that they are an imperialistic power. Their belligerence and defensiveness is backed up by their aggression and their advanced technology and willingness to use it. The fact that they are so hostile would mean that they are confident in their technological ability to repel most of the other races in their local region of space and don't feel particularly threatened by them. If they can protect their territory not only with an advanced sensor grid but these huge swarms of fighters, of which these small vessels were capable of matching Voyager for speed, that means that they have a lot of these ships. Now, one swarm had thousands of fighters, and you've got to assume that there were hundreds of these swarms scattered across their space, so also they have a large population. Each fighter, assuming it only has a single pilot, and they probably didn't, they probably had a small crew on board, that means each swarm probably has 100,000 personnel per swarm. If there's 1,000 swarms, you can do the math. And then you factor in that even within a militarized state, the maximum population that's probably part of the military is maybe 5%, so their population is definitely in the billions. Those are things we can surmise, but we know nothing about their government structure, their social structure, their genders. We don't know anything about how they reproduce, their biology. Did the ones we meet, were they male? Were they female? Were they something else? Just saying, they're aliens. Just because they looked masculine in basic profile doesn't mean that they were. So we know nearly nothing about them. But they're an interesting race to discuss, and they come at a time when Voyager really didn't need to have any major delays. They'd only just really arrived in the Delta Quadrant, and they didn't need to be stopped by a race to control 1,500 meters of space in width. Although, I did often wonder, it's like the race's territory is so deep, but space is three-dimensional. It's like, just use basic terms, assuming there was a north and a south and up and down and everything. Why not go up or under swarm space? Was it, I know it was 1,500 meters in length, but it was very narrow. It was like a huge sword through the Delta Quadrant. But how deep was it? Instead of flying through it, they couldn't go around because that would have took years. But couldn't they have gone over and maybe added a week onto the journey and not had the risk of being killed? It's another example of some questionable decisions made by the command crew of Voyager in their desperate attempt to rush home and fling themselves into danger. It's like, should we go on a straight line, nice and easy to get home, and only stop when necessary, or go on an extremely dangerous side quest that could get us all killed? I know! And it was quite often the case. And then sometimes when they had an opportunity to go home, and my big stickler is the Barzan wormhole, they didn't go. How many of Voyager's crew died after the Barzan wormhole incident? I'm just saying, those deaths could have been easily avoided if they'd have just flown through the bloody wormhole. I think I've discussed this before, and I'm getting off topic. That was the Swarm, a mysterious and violent territorial xenophobic species of which we know almost nothing about, and quite frankly, unless something happens to their culture and sociology to mean that they come out of their shell a little bit, we probably never will. I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.